My hands felt like they were made of stone, these thick old fingers stumbling across the laptop keyboard like they'd forgotten the path. I squinted at the bright screen, the letters swimming together into a gray blur. Dang it all, I muttered, leaning in closer. The email's right there. I seen it yesterday. From the worn couch next to me, my grandson Travis let out a long, patient sigh, the kind only a teenager can muster for a hopeless old man. Just show me what you're looking for, Pawpaw. Let me help. He was a good boy, 17, with his mama's kind eyes. He took the laptop from my lap, his young fingers flying over the trackpad with the confidence I'd lost decades ago. I watched him click through my cluttered desktop, past folders named Bills and Mining Cody docs. It should be right there in the inbox, I insisted, pointing a shaky finger. I'm looking, he said, his voice soft. He opened my documents folder to search, scrolling through years of my digital hoarding. And then he clicked on a folder I'd forgotten about entirely. Tax Returns 2022. I was about to tell him that wasn't it, but the words died in my throat. The folder opened. It wasn't just tax forms. There were scanned bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, all from the family mining company's accounts. My company, the one my daddy built, and I'd run for 40 years before my son, Waylon, took over. Travis froze. His easygoing posture stiffened. On the screen, line after line glowed in the dim light of my living room. Massive transfers. 50,000, 200,000. All going to numbered accounts in places with names I couldn't even pronounce. The description field simply read consulting. The air left the room. The only sound was the low hum of the laptop fan and the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Travis's eyes, wide and suddenly much older, scanned the documents. He didn't say a word. He just slowly turned his head to look at me, and in his face, I saw my own dawning horror reflected back. That folder wasn't for taxes. It was a ledger. A secret, damning ledger of theft. And my boy, my own son Waylon, had been bleeding our family's legacy dry, thinking his old man was too blind and too confused to ever find it. I just stared at the glowing proof, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The trust I had built my life on crumbled to dust right there in my own recliner. The smell of old wood and coal dust never really leaves a mining man's home. I sat in my armchair, Clint, feeling every one of my 72 years in my knees, and looked around the living room. This wasn't just a house, it was a museum of our life's work. Frames crowded every wall, black and white photos fading into color. There was my grandfather, Ezekiel, standing proud before a timbered portal. My father, Jacob, covered in grime but smiling next to a haul truck. Then me, a younger man with dark hair, one hand on a drill, the other on my boy Waylon's shoulder. He was beaming that day. I remember it clear as spring water. That was before, 5 years ago to be exact. My lungs had started their betrayal, the doctor calling it black lung's cousin, from a lifetime underground. It was time. Waylon, my only son, sat right where you're sitting now, Travis, and he laid out his vision. He had binders, charts on a laptop. Pop, he said, his voice so earnest, we're dinosaurs. I can modernize, streamline, make this business thrive for another generation, for my boy. He meant you. How could I say no? I signed over operational control, trusting the bloodline, but the pictures on the wall started to feel like ghosts. First, it was the little things. Old Joe Henderson, who'd worked the tipple for 40 years, called me, his voice shaky. Clint, he said, my pension check was short. Waylon says it's a system error. Then it was Mikey Lawson, laid off. Not cost effective, Waylon told him. The equipment, the groaning haul trucks and drills I'd maintained with my own hands, they weren't being replaced, just patched with prayers and baling wire. I'd drive down to the office, this new sleek trailer Waylon had brought in. He'd be in a crisp shirt, talking about asset management and liability ceilings. The warmth of the place, the feeling of crew as family, was gone, replaced by a cold hum of computers. The men who'd slap my back and call me boss. Even after I retired, they'd just nod now, eyes on the ground. The life was being slowly bled out of everything my father and his father had built. And I sat here, in this chair, surrounded by the smiling ghosts of better days, watching the legacy crumble from my own front window. I felt a fool, not angry yet. That came later, just a deep, hollow shame. I'd handed the keys to the kingdom to my son, and he was selling off the crown jewels, one by one, while telling me the kingdom had never looked better. The trust, the very bedrock of this family, was turning to dust, and I didn't know yet that the proof of it all was already hidden in my own house, waiting to be found. I settled deeper into my old recliner, the leather creaking a familiar complaint. To anyone walking by, I was just Clint, an old man catching an afternoon nap. The sunlight through the living room window was warm on my closed eyelids, but I wasn't sleeping. My heart was pounding a steady, anxious rhythm against my ribs. On the dark, silent screen of the television across the room, I could see it all. The faint, distorted reflection was my window into Travis's world. He was at the dining table, just behind my chair, hunched over his laptop. His young face, usually so quick with a smile, was etched with a deep, troubled focus I'd never seen before. I'd left the folder, the ledger, open on that table. Just for a moment, just long enough. I'd shuffled off to my chair, muttering about a heavy lunch, and pretended to drift off. Now I watched the ghostly reflection of my grandson scroll through page after page of my secret life, the account numbers, the transfers, the cold, hard proof of everything his father, my son Waylon, had been siphoning away for years. Travis's fingers flew over the keyboard. He'd pull up a number from my papers, type it in, and then just stare. His shoulders would tense. He'd run a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. Then he'd type something else, his eyes scanning the screen with an intensity that made my throat tight with pride and fear. He's looking them up, I thought. He's checking the numbers. I saw him lean in, suddenly, squinting at the screen. He copied a long string of digits and pasted them somewhere new. A minute passed, then another. His reflection went perfectly still. Then slowly he sat back as if pushed. He just stared at the laptop, his mouth a thin, hard line. He'd found it. I didn't need to see the screen to know. He'd traced one of Waylon's clever little trails and found it led straight to a shell company. Somewhere with palm trees and no questions asked. The Caymans, probably. I'd done the same research, late at night, my own hands trembling with the rage I couldn't show. A part of me wanted to jump up, to put a hand on his shoulder and say, I know, I see it too. But I couldn't. The charade was everything now. I was just a napping old man, oblivious. So I let out a soft, fake snore, the way I always did. I didn't even flutter my eyelids. In the reflection, Travis slowly closed his laptop. He didn't look at me. He looked out the window, his expression a storm of confusion and dawning, horrible understanding. He was putting the pieces together, and each one was shaped like his own father's betrayal. I kept my breathing slow and even, the perfect picture of sleep while my mind raced. The hook was set. The first thread of trust between me and Travis had been spun, not from my words, but from the truth he'd found for himself. Now we just had to see if it would be strong enough to hold when the real storm hit. The smell of his cologne hit me first, one of those sharp, expensive scents that doesn't belong in an old farmhouse. Waylon filled the doorway, all smiles and a wristwatch that probably cost more than my truck. Hey there, Dad, he said, his voice that smooth, practiced drawl. He stepped in, not waiting for an invite, and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. Just checking in on you. Place looking good. I let my eyes go a little vague, the way I do. Waylon, this is a surprise. I shuffled toward my worn armchair, playing the part. He didn't sit. He paced, a panther in a polo shirt. Just tough out there right now, you know. Market conditions. He sighed, a dramatic, world-weary sound. The board's getting nervous. Pressure's on from all sides. He stopped and looked right at me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. It'd sure ease my mind, ease everyone's mind, if we made your holdings official. Get those last shares signed over. For stability. My heart was a drum against my ribs, but I just blinked slowly. Shares? Son, that lawyer fella sends me such thick papers. My eyes ain't what they used to be. Waylon's jaw tightened. Just a flicker. He forced another laugh. We'll get it sorted. Simple signature. Then his gaze slid past me, landing on the old desktop computer in the corner. It was a quick look, here and gone. But I saw it, a nervous tick. He took a step toward it, then caught himself. You haven't been messing with that thing, have you, Dad? His tone was light, too light, like he was asking about the weather, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the dusty monitor, the keyboard. Might be best to leave it unplugged. Power surges, you know, could lose everything. I followed his stare, letting my own look confused. That old relic? Travis was by the other day. Showed me some pictures of his boy on it. Just pictures. I waved a dismissive, slightly trembling hand. I can barely turn the blame thing on. He watched me for a long second, the charm melting into something harder, more assessing. The silence stretched, filled only by the tick of the mantel clock. He was looking for a lie, for a crack in the act. Finally he nodded, the smile returning like a switch had been flipped. Good. Just looking out for you. He patted my shoulder again, the gesture feeling more like a warning. I'll have those new papers drawn up, cleaner this time, big print. He left then, the expensive scent lingering behind him like a ghost. I waited until I heard his car engine fade down the gravel drive. Only then did I let my shoulders slump, not from age, but from the weight of the performance. My eyes went to the computer, to the innocent-looking folder icon labeled Taxes 2005. The ledger was safe. For now, but Waylon's nervous glance had told me everything I needed to know. The hunt was on, and he'd just caught the scent. The old keyboard in my office had seen better days. It was practically a relic, just like me, but today it was about to serve a higher purpose. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt too loud for the quiet house. Waylon was out at one of his endless compliance meetings, which I now knew was just code for covering his tracks. Travis stood beside my desk, his hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. We didn't dare speak our plan out loud. The walls in this old house had ears, especially when my son was involved. "You ready, Grandpa?" Travis asked, his voice low. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Just getting a refill on my tea," I said, a little too loudly for the empty room, playing my part. I picked up the tall, sweating glass of sweet tea, my prop. With a carefully calculated clumsiness, I fumbled with the glass, letting it tip directly over the keyboard. The tea, dark as molasses, poured over the keys with a sickening glug. "Oh, for heaven's sake," I grumbled, putting on my best frustrated old man act. I dabbed at it with a handkerchief, making the sticky mess worse. "Travis, this darn thing's fried. All my solitaire files." Travis didn't miss a beat. He sprang into action, the perfect picture of a helpful grandson. "Don't you worry, Grandpa Clint. I'll get this backed up and see what I can salvage. You shouldn't lose your important documents." The look in his eyes was sharp, focused. We were no longer just grandfather and grandson. We were covert partners. He got to work, unplugging the machine with efficient hands. He hooked up an external drive, his fingers flying across a laptop he'd brought. The system backup was a beautiful, legitimate excuse. As the progress bar crept along, he navigated through the directories. My breath caught when I saw him open the hidden folder, the one labeled Tax Archives that held the real treasure. He copied it all, every last file. When it was done, he opened a few. Spreadsheets unfolded on his screen, columns of numbers that made no sense to my old eyes, but told a clear story to Travis. His face, usually so warm and open, went pale, then hardened into something cold. "He's been moving money, Grandpa," Travis whispered, his voice tight with anger. "For years. See these transfers, these regulatory cost payments?" He pointed at line after line. "They're ghosts. They go to shell companies. Over $2 million. The number hung in the air, a physical weight. 2 million, stolen from the company, from the men who'd worked the mines with me, men whose pensions were now on the chopping block. And here," Travis said, pulling up another document, "the layoff notices for the Southridge crew, approved last week. He's blaming these fake costs for why he has to let them go." I stared at the screen, at the proof of my son's betrayal. It wasn't just greed. It was a cruelty so deep it stole the air from the room. He wasn't just taking money, he was destroying lives and using the ruins to build his own fortune. The ledger was no longer just a hidden folder. It was a weapon, and finally we had it in our hands. The smell of old paper and dust filled my study, the same smell that's been here for 50 years. I was oiling the hinge on my old Remington when the door swung open without a knock. Waylon. He had that look in his eye, the one he gets when he's about to tell me how the world works. "Afternoon, Dad. We need to talk business." He didn't sit. He just laid a thick bound document on my desk, right over the cleaning rag. The cover was slick, corporate. Cumberland Valley Mineral Group, it read. "What's this, son?" "Progress," he said, his voice smooth as Tennessee whiskey, but twice as bitter. "It's a sale agreement. Cumberland Valley is buying all our mineral rights. It's a premium offer. More money than this land has seen in 3 generations. My heart, this old tired thing, gave a hard thump against my ribs. Our mineral rights? Waylon, that's not just our land. Those leases support half the town. The Jennings brothers run their drilling crew on our contracts. The machine shop over in Millertown is obsolete, he finished for me, his jaw set. This deal cleans the slate. It's a fresh start. A fresh start for who? I asked, but my eyes were already scanning the first page. My reading glasses were in my pocket. I put them on, the world snapping into sharp, cruel focus. He leaned over, his finger stabbing at the signature line. For us. You just need to sign right there. They want it executed by tomorrow noon. I turned the page. And the next. The legal jargon was a maze, but I've been navigating mazes since before this boy was born. I saw the purchase price, a number so big it felt meaningless. Then, in the dense thicket of clauses on page 17, I saw it. Article 7.4, Facilitator Consultation Fee. I read aloud, my voice gone quiet. Payable to Waylon Matthews Consulting, LLC, in the sum of $500,000. The room went still. The only sound was the slow tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. I looked up at my son, the boy I taught to fish on the Greenbrier River, the man who now stood in my study, selling off his birthright and charging a $500,000 finder's fee for the privilege. You're not just selling the land, are you? I said, the words ash in my mouth. You're selling the people on it, and you're getting a golden parachute for pushing them out of the plane. His face tightened, a flush creeping up his neck. It's a standard broker's fee. It's how business is done. This isn't business, Waylon, I said, tapping the document. This is a betrayal. All these years. The ledger was right. He went pale at the mention of the ledger, the hidden folder, the truth. You have until tomorrow, he said, his composure cracking into something harder, colder. Sign it, or I'll find another way to get what's mine. He turned and left, leaving the damning papers on my desk. I stared at the neat line where I was supposed to sign my name, my town, my conscience away. The trigger had been pulled. Now I had to decide how to fire back. The old mining office smelled of dust and decades, just like I remembered. Waylon stood by the rusted-out filing cabinet, tapping his boot, that same impatient energy he'd had since he was a boy. Only now it was edged with greed. All right, Pop, he said, holding out the sleek modern contract. Enough stalling. The buyers want signatures by 5. I made my hands tremble a little as I took the paper. I let my eyes go soft, looking around at the empty desks where men like my father had once worked. You're right, son, you're right. I sighed, the picture of a defeated old man. But a thing like this, selling the last piece of your granddaddy's legacy, it ain't just ink on paper. Waylon's jaw tightened. What now? Tradition, I said, my voice gaining a frail strength. In this very room, every big decision was made with the family and the men who bled for it. I see their ghosts, Waylon. I won't disrespect them. I looked him right in the eye, playing the sentimental fool to the hilt. Call a meeting, right here. One last time. Get old Jim Bowen from the assay office, and Mikey from the transport yard, all of them. Let me look at the men I'm doing this for, then I'll sign. He scoffed, a harsh sound in the quiet room. That'll take an hour. Then we've got an hour? I said, sinking into the creaking wooden chair behind the foreman's desk. For tradition, or no deal. He muttered something foul under his breath, but he pulled out his phone. He wanted this too badly. While he stepped outside for a better signal, I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the shadows in the back corner. That was Travis's cue. My grandson, silent as a deer, had been waiting. As Waylon barked orders into his phone, Travis moved. From my old leather satchel, he pulled my laptop and a small portable projector. His fingers flew, connecting cables. He aimed the projector at the only clean wall, the one still painted that faded mining company green. On the laptop screen, a single folder sat waiting, labeled simply, the ledger. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a cold, focused clarity I hadn't felt in years. Waylon was rounding up the old-timers, thinking he was humoring a doddering old man's last request. He had no idea that with every minute that passed, Travis was securing the digital noose. The evidence wasn't just numbers on a page. It was the story of every dollar diverted, every safety check skipped for profit, every lie my son had told. And soon it wouldn't just be me looking at it. It would be everyone who'd ever trusted us. I folded my hands on the desk, the picture of patience. The stage was set. Now, we just needed the audience to arrive. The pen felt cold in my hand as Waylon beamed down at me. The conference room was too bright, all polished wood and smug faces. My son's smile was the widest of all. He thought he'd won. He thought I was just a confused old man, signing away my legacy. "Right there, Dad," Waylon said, his voice smooth as Tennessee whiskey. He pointed to the line. My fingers trembled, but not from age, from purpose. I shifted in my chair, my elbow catching the half-full mug of lukewarm coffee. It tipped with a perfect clumsy clatter, dark liquid cascading over the polished table, heading straight for the stack of pristine contracts. "Oh, for heaven's sake," I fumbled, my voice a frail warble. "Look what I've done." Waylon jerked back, a flash of irritation breaking through his grin. It's fine. Someone get some napkins." This was the moment. I turned to my grandson, Travis, who was sitting quietly by my laptop, his jaw tight. "Oh, Travis," I sighed, playing the helpless patriarch to the hilt. "Help your old grandpa. This computer's got those nice pictures from the company picnic last fall. Why don't you pull those up on the big screen for everyone to see while we clean up this mess? Give us something pleasant to look at." Waylon nodded absently, dabbing at the contracts with a handkerchief. "Yeah, good idea, Dad. Lighten the mood." Travis's eyes met mine. No words were needed. We'd rehearsed this in my dusty study for weeks. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod, his fingers moving over my laptop's trackpad. The room's large monitor flickered to life. Instead of smiling faces and barbecue, the screen filled with scanned bank statements. A frozen silence fell. "What is this?" Waylon whispered, his face draining of color. Travis clicked again. A network diagram appeared. A spider web of shell companies with names like Mountain Hollow Holdings and Blue Ridge Ventures. Murmurs rippled around the table from the other board members, men I'd known for decades. Another click. And there it was, the crown jewel from the ledger. A single damning wire transfer. A 7-figure commission payment from the rival conglomerate, dated the day after our initial exploratory talks began, sent directly to an account in Waylon's name. A collective, sharp intake of breath, a roomful of gasps, filled the air. The sound was sweeter than any music. Waylon stood perfectly still, his handkerchief stained brown, forgotten in his hand. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at me. And for the first time, my son truly saw me, not the old man, not the mark, but Clint. The coffee stain spread across his perfect contract, bleeding over his signature line, ruining everything, just as planned. The silence in that old company office was so thick you could feel it pressing down. Waylon stood there, my own son, his face pale but his eyes still burning with that same defiant fire I'd seen since he was a boy, who'd lost his way. He tried to bluff. "You've got no proof of anything, old man. Just the ramblings of a confused pensioner." But then he threatened. He took a step toward Travis, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You'll regret dragging our name through the mud, boy." That's when the room turned. It wasn't just me and Travis anymore. Hank, the mining foreman with hands like shovel heads, stood up from the corner. He'd been quiet the whole time. "Been waiting for this day," he grumbled, pulling a worn notebook from his jacket. "My own records. Safety inspection funds, marked approved by you, Waylon. Never reached my crew. Bought a lot of fancy nothing, I reckon." The air left the room. Waylon's bluster faltered, his eyes darting to the door. That's when it opened. Sheriff Jenkins walked in, his hat in his hands. We'd fished together as kids. He gave me a slow, sad nod before his gaze hardened on Waylon. And right behind him was a severe-looking woman in a sharp suit, the state financial crimes investigator Travis had secretly called weeks ago after we first found the ledger. My grandson, smarter than I ever gave him credit for. "Waylon Barton," the investigator said, her voice cool and clear. "We have a warrant to seize all company financial records, and based on concurrent evidence, you are under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." I just watched. My heart wasn't pounding with victory. It was a heavy, dull ache in my chest. This was my boy. Sheriff Jenkins stepped forward, gently taking Waylon by the arm. The cuffs clicked, a sound so small and final it seemed to echo off the wood-paneled walls. Waylon didn't look at me as they led him out. He kept his head down, his shoulders slumped, all the fight gone. As they passed through the main office, a strange sound started. It began with Hank, a slow, solid clap. Then another miner joined, and another. It wasn't cheers of joy, but a deep, resonant applause of relief, of a weight being lifted. They were applauding for the truth, not for his fall. Travis put a steadying hand on my shoulder. I watched the taillights of the sheriff's car disappear down the mountain road, taking a piece of my history with it. The ledger lay on the desk, its job finally done. The company was wounded, but it was still standing, and for the first time in years, it was clean. The evening air on the porch is cool and clean, carrying the scent of cut grass from my yard. 6 months have a way of sanding down the sharp edges of a memory, turning panic into story. I sit in my favorite rocking chair, the one that groans just right, and beside me in the matching one is Travis. Between us, on the little wicker table, sits my laptop, its screen glowing softly in the twilight. Below us, the town looks peaceful. The lights are coming on in windows, and from the direction of the mine, the steady, healthy rumble of a single shift working echoes. It's a different sound now. It's not the greedy, grinding groan of a machine being bled dry. It's the sound of people who own a piece of what they're digging for. Employee owned. Profitable again. The words still feel a little foreign, but the feeling in my chest when I hear that shift whistle isn't. I tap a key on the laptop, scrolling through my email. Order confirmation for a new set of garden shears. A newsletter from the Historical Society. Nothing urgent, nothing frightening, just the quiet digital paperwork of a calm life. You checking your stocks, Grandpa? Travis teases, taking a sip of his sweet tea. Nah, I grunt, clicking a message open, just making sure the world ain't ended. Without me knowing. I type out a short reply, my fingers, though knotted and stiff from a lifetime underground, finding the keys with a certainty they didn't have before. I hit send and lean back, the rocker creaking. I look over at Travis, his young face relaxed, no longer pinched with the worry he carried for so long. The ledger, that hidden folder of numbers that nearly broke us, is just a file on a county server now, evidence locked away. Waylon's facing his own music, far from here. The silence between me and my grandson is the comfortable kind, filled with the sounds of crickets starting up. I turn to him, a warmth spreading through my old bones that has nothing to do with the setting sun. You know, I say, and I can feel the twinkle in my own eye, a spark I thought had gone dark with the coal dust. I really did need help with that computer. Travis stares at me for a second, then a laugh bursts out of him, rich and full. It rolls across the porch and mixes with the evening sounds. He shakes his head, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. Yeah, he chuckles. Yeah, you sure did. I just smile, looking back out over my town, our town. The old miner outsmarted his own son to save it. The thought doesn't bring pride. Not exactly. It brings a quiet, deep satisfaction. It proves something, I suppose. Some things, like knowing right from wrong, like a stubborn love for your home, and like a cleverness born of sheer necessity, don't fade with age. They just settle in deeper, waiting for the right moment to dig back to the light.